atmosphere.
We are now joined by Fox Sports' Tim Brando. Speaking of truth serum, here we go. College football, buckle up. Tim Brando has Washington State and Colorado this week. Both teams are struggling quite a bit. And, Tim, thank you as always for your time. We have a lot of topics to get to, but two teams that are on a free fall. Your thoughts about the access you're going to have with Deion, Colorado, and also with Washington State?
Well, I'm excited about it. Very excited about seeing Deion because it's been a while. Spencer and I worked with him at CBS, and we broke bread a few times together. And, of course, I covered him as a collegian at Florida State when he played for St. Bobby. And he even did a game day open back in the Ice Age, long before some of you guys were around, where he came down in his Trans Am with a $1 million signing bonus he got from George Steinbrenner. And he had a Trans Am with the T-tops down that he had just purchased. He's there in the driveway of his house with his mom, and he peeks out from the top of the T-tops, took the T-tops off, and he said, "Hey, Tim Brando, how you likes me now?" And it was a golden moment in my young career hosting College Game Day on ESPN back in those days. That was in '87. That was during that period when he was saying, "I'm going to take it back," the punt against Clemson, and so many other great things that he did for Coach Bowden at Florida State at that time. It was so I've known him forever. My career and as a broadcaster really mirrored his. I followed him even my days with the Braves when I got the World Series ring working with Ernie Johnson Sr. He was a player for the Atlanta Braves when he was also playing for the Falcons. So I was there for all of that and saw him evolve and emerge from that point forward. And then living in Shreveport as I do and knowing how many Cowboys fans there were when Jerry Jones got him away from the 49ers when San Francisco had stopped the potential three-peat with Aikman and Smith and Irvin and those guys, and they went right back with Barry Switzer and won a Super Bowl. Deion was part of that, and then he comes into television and just immediately hits. Just a really, really talented guy. And I don't know that a lot of people understood what I did about him, and that is the bling and the bravado, is immense, and maybe it's too immense for some. But if you get to know him, and I have really well through the years, he has evolved into, truly one of the great leaders of men that we have, whether it's in coaching or, as a layperson. I mean, he really does play the role of a father and mentor to these kids that he coaches. And I'm thoroughly impressed by it. He hit a tough patch and a couple of games got away from him. The two games, especially the one with Stanford in the second half, which I think he got a little lesson in what can happen with college players, particularly at the highest level. When you're competing at this level, when you exhale, as they did in the second half against Stanford, they got burned. And then it happened again, really, with a couple of breakdowns last week. They should have won those two games, and they'd be bowl eligible right now. But I think the intrigue and how do I put it, the juice, you would think Patina would be down just a little bit with them losing these games of late, 5 of their last 6. But the truth is, he still must see TV. That's why we're doing this game. Fox wanted Spencer and yours truly to be on this game rather than the Oregon-Arizona State game on Fox on Saturday. And we had a lot of eyeballs on Friday night. There's no other game going. And, he's worth about 2.5 to 3 million viewers just because he's coaching the game. Mm-hmm. No coach in college football has that cachet. No one, not even Saban. If Saban's team were 500, would anybody really care? No. I mean, I remember when he was coaching Alabama and they went 500 and lost to my alma mater in his first year. Not many people cared, but the following year they really did because he got it together. He's just a unique individual. There's no one like Deion. Probably will never see the likes of him again as a player or as a coach. So it's must-see TV. And, the Washington State story here is equally impactful because think about it. They had 4 straight wins. First time they had done that in a long, long while. They had beaten 2 ranked teams. The victories over Wisconsin early and then Oregon State early were huge, especially when you consider what Oregon State has done since then. And for them to have lost 6 in a row is pretty amazing. Cam Ward is a great talent. I'm going to be really intrigued by what that kid does against Deion Sanders, because Ward, as you know, was a kid that nobody knew about. And I don't even think Cam Ward knew how good he was when he was coming out of high school, in West Texas, and winds up at Incarnate Word and then follows his coach to Washington State. And he hit big right away. Spencer and I were here when they played Oregon last year. They had a big lead. And then Bo Nix, the legend of Bo Nix, really began in the second half of that game. Oregon came from down 3 scores to win. And I don't think Nix has looked back since. I think his position as really one of the favorites for the Heisman, if not the favorite, really started with that game against Washington State last year. But so they're good teams. And one of them, I think, has a shot to get bowl eligible. But they got to win this game tomorrow. And I've said this all along, Smoak. You know this. If Deion wins 6 games, if he can win this game and then somehow beat Utah the following week and get bowl eligible, I think he's coach of the year. I think he's absolutely coach of the year when you consider where that program was and where he's taken it in just a calendar year. That's incredible. But again, he's got to take care of business in this game. Martin Stadium is a pit, man. It's hard to get a road win in the Pac-12 or the Pac-8 or the Pac-10 when you play in this place. Going back to the Gardner Minshew era when game day was here, and Spencer and I had that game with Oregon when Herbert was playing. It was incredible. Oregon had no chance that night. So it's really hard to get a road win at Wazoo.
Tim, so obviously since Deion is, elite, that means he's a candidate for the A&M job, like every coach seems to be. Even though he said no, Urban said no, Dan Lanning said no, I think Mike Norvell said no. So realistically, what is A&M's pool in your mind?
So did Urban say no today? Was that official?
Yeah,
Urban
he said
no today.
Yeah, he said that he was, happy with 37 years of coaching and where he was, and I would just think that for A&M they might want somebody who theoretically would be there longer. Urban seems to be if he was coaching kind of the Larry Brown phase of his career.
Right. No, that's a very good comparison, actually. Yeah, and I had said it had been suggested by Jake Crane yesterday. I was with him about Urban, and he did make a lot of sense because of the people that are looking to make the purchase. Okay, those oil barons, especially the ones that are my age and a little older. Procuring a guy like Myers sounds really good to an Aggie.
Yeah.
But I also felt, and I understand it, that Urban's at a stage in his life when maybe this is not the right time. I do think that he's interested in helping programs find the right coach. He likes that role, okay, because he's got a lot of tentacles in the coaching profession that are still out there, and maybe he can help those guys as a counselor find the right guy. But I really believe, you heard what Dan Lanning had to say, and I think a lot of coaches in that position. Prime is another example, by the way. He's not interested in going to Texas A&M right now. I'm going to meet with him tomorrow night, and we'll probably chuckle a little bit about it. Prime's interested in making his own history, okay, not rekindling somebody else's. And A&M believes it has history. Now, they don't have history as national championships or being dominant, okay? But to say that they don't have any history, come on now. I mean, the Junction Boys, Jackie Sherrill's run, R.C. Slocum was a staple of that community and still is. I don't want to throw what those guys' achievements were under the rug because they were plentiful. It's not just about national titles. So I think somebody that makes a lot of sense, that is on his way up, okay, but has really proven to be an outstanding coach, is somebody they're going to take a long look at. And maybe to some extent, because of the buyout with Jimbo, maybe a lot of that money is saying, you know what, we want to make a more sensible hire this time. We're willing to pay, but let's not just go overboard and make another Jimbo type of hire, which to me lends itself to maybe a guy like Fish at Arizona, who just beat Deion and has really turned Arizona around. I mean, that's a hell of a job he's done. And that guy's coached some in the NFL. He's been everywhere. Jeff Traylor, what he's done, he's a Texas legend. He's a high school legend. Mm-hmm. The UTSA job, he's really turned it into, they've challenged in a league with Tulane, who I think has the best program outside of the so-called Power Five. They've been very challenging, and the Racers are, and that whole city is really behind him. He'll turn up the volume if he gets there, and he'll get great players in the state of Texas, which I think is important to the Aggie faithful, particularly with Sark and the Horns making their way in on a run here that looks a hell of a lot better than the Aggies recently. Okay, so a guy like Traylor could offset some of that tremendous momentum and lead that the perception is Texas may have going into the SEC. And as you guys know, this is true at A&M and at Texas, much like it is at Alabama and Auburn. So many of the decisions that are made at places like Texas and Texas A&M have to do with what their donors feel about what the other is doing. Okay. For years, Alabama couldn't get it right, and they were being dominated by Tommy Tuberville because Auburn was ahead of them. And so they made decisions in Tuscaloosa that, they got sidetracked. I think that's happened some with both Texas and with Texas A&M through the years because they're concentrating too much on what's going on at the other place as opposed to at their own house. So I think that the Traylor hire in particular is one that I sort of like. I like the idea of that. And now that some of those big names, like you mentioned, Urban especially, have come clean that they're not interested in this point in time, then I think that opens the door for A&M to make its move. And I think it's important they make the move soon. With all those guys in the portal, all those guys, all that great talent, you want to get somebody in that can re-secure, re-recruit all that great talent. And Traylor would be, I think, an excellent choice in that regard. Proximity and success in the state of Texas.
Tim, you mentioned you're going to be in Pullman coming up on Friday night, but elsewhere in the Pac-12, 5-11, Washington at Oregon State. The Beavers are favorites in this game, and that's pretty much been the case all week long. I think they're like 2.5-point favorites as it stands right now. Are you expecting chaos in Oregon State country coming up this weekend?
Well, I expect carnage everywhere. Yeah. This time of year. November is always about that, and we always act shocked. Mm-hmm. The national pundits, the national media will go, "Oh my God, did you see that? How could that have happened? Boy, that throws a wrench into everybody's plans." Wait, how many more times do we have to see an Iron Bowl upset, or a Civil War upset, or an Apple Cup upset, or whatever that changes the complexion of the postseason? It happens all the time. I know that our friends in the SEC are counting on it. Alabama fans especially are counting on Texas to go down somehow, some way. Could Iowa State pull it off? Ames is hard. Ames is a very difficult place to get a win. It's sort of the Big 12's answer to Martin Stadium here in Wazoo. It's a tough place to play as a road team. It really is. And if you look at the situation at Reser Stadium, I've been there twice this year. Chip Kelly, who's rumored to be fired at UCLA, he had it rolling. He had that 5-star freshman quarterback ready to go. They roll into Oregon to Reser Stadium to play against Oregon State a few weeks back, and they got absolutely drilled. Oregon State dominated them. And UCLA's defense going into that game was the best in the Pac-12. All across the board, their defense was playing at a very high level. Now they are really struggling. So Oregon State has tipped over a lot of teams that felt like they were on the way to accomplishing something great. Jonathan Smith knew all along that the gauntlet was right now, that it was a backloaded schedule. So he's prepared for this. They've had a couple of open dates. They've stayed relatively injury-free. Uiagalelei has very quietly had a real bounce-back year at quarterback. In a league with great quarterbacks, he probably would have to be considered middle of the road in the Pac-12, but that kid can make plays. I mean, can make a lot of plays. And their defense is very active and hard to beat, particularly when they play at home. So Washington had better bring it, and those 3 wide receivers had better be physical in the way they run their patterns. I think the best 3 receivers on one team, McMillan to go with Odunze, those guys are unbelievable. Now, you can make a case that Marvin Harrison, Wes Neighbors are better individually at the wide receiver position, but I don't know of a team that's got 3 better than Washington. Those 3 are incredible, and Michael Penix knows that, and he has zero concern when he throws up a 50-50 ball. And I think that's the difference for Washington. If they're going to win the game, they're going to have to win those 50-50 battles against the Oregon State secondary. The other one that jumps out at me, fellas, besides that game, and there's several others, but the other one that jumps out at me that people are probably sleeping on is that Arizona State-Oregon game. You saw what Arizona State just did to UCLA. That's what got Chip in all kinds of trouble. Kenny Dillingham knows more about Oregon than just about anybody, does he not? Mm-hmm. Oh, hello. And the game is where? So they better not have a too full a cup of success themselves after what they did last week to USC. But I doubt that Dan Lanning will let that happen. He is an incredible coach. And I've said this all along. The last month of the season, even though they've got a loss, I think Oregon's been playing the best football of any team in the country. And it's unconscionable to me that a team like Washington that's undefeated, playing against the Pac-12 schedule, chock full of all those top 25 teams and great, and I do mean great, quarterbacks, could be considered a team that has to get help from Florida State losing with the committee. I think eventually Oregon or Washington will bypass Florida State. I think the Seminoles have a chance to lose. I'll put it that way. I think the game at the Swamp could be a real problem for them. You want carnage? How about that one to get the Florida faithful off of Billy Napier, to get a victory against Norvell and FSU? I think that's a real potential of that happening. So, yeah, a lot of carnage. People now are looking at the top 12 and talking about the matchups that we could have if we had a 12-team playoff now. I noticed that's a hot topic as I was coming in during my drive from Spokane through the Palouse today. And I'm saying, don't start counting the 12 now. Start counting the 12 after rivalry week, after Thanksgiving. It could be shuffled big time. And that's where some amazing matchups could be there for us to salivate over before we wait for this pathetic 14 playoff to finally come to a merciful end.
Tim, which of the drives from an airport to the city of where you're going to broadcast a game is the prettiest one?
Boy, that's a great question. That is a great question. Going to Oregon is pretty, man. From Portland into Eugene or Corvallis, they're essentially the same. You just have to drive a little longer to get to Eugene, especially with fall foliage. And it was out and it was sunny. We had a rainy day, typical Washington rainy day coming in from Spokane, but it's gorgeous too. Last year I was here in October for a game and it was just marvelous. But I would say if you're going to the greatest drive I've ever taken, this has nothing to do with football. The greatest drive is from Tahoe to the Monterey Peninsula. If you guys have never made that drive from Lake Tahoe down to Spyglass and Pebble, that may be the prettiest drive you can take in the continental United States. And the other one that's really awesome is if you're in Seattle and you drive to Vancouver. Okay, if you go towards Vancouver, that's a beautiful drive too. But that's a great question, Smoak. I've not really thought about that too often, but those are pretty ones. And thankfully now somebody else is doing the driving. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No.
So I'm able to take it all in and I'm enjoying it. I don't like taking puddle jumpers into small college towns anymore, largely because they can cancel them so quickly.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck.
Yeah.
So I would rather fly into the bigger city with a bigger airport and an MD-80 at the smallest, an MD-80, and then take the car service into the college town. Enjoy it. It allows you to enjoy the ride.
Yep. Take it in, soak it in. Paul,
Tim,
you're still mad because he brought up
No.
Florida?
Look, they almost got him last year in Tallahassee. That Florida State had to kind of claw back in that one, and they play with their food, so to speak. All of that. And look, there's nobody who's great, really this year yet. So
no. I'd say of the teams that everybody's talking about, the 12 top teams, wouldn't you have to say of those 12, at least 7 or 8 of them would have legitimate chances to win it all?
Sure.
This year.
Yeah. And Tim, if you threw this, out there and there's no matchup that could happen among any of the 4 permutations you could think that I would think would be so out of whack that someone would be like, oh, well, obviously Michigan could just win this. Now, they might be the best team, but they also haven't played a team like Texas or Alabama or Florida or Washington or Oregon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, and I felt the same way about Georgia until last week. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what they did in the second half to Ole Miss, okay, I'm a believer again. They, and the other thing that Georgia's got going for them now that they didn't have before, and I was really doubting them when McConkey was out. The receiving core was not healthy, and they were really relying on Bowers. Well, those receivers, and they're not Sterling, they're not Neighbors, they're not Harrison, they're not Rome Odunze or McMillan at Washington, but they're really good. And with Georgia's run game and Beck really evolving, I think because of all the love that Jalen Milroe's been getting about his improvement, and it's deserved. I mean, he's really improved, but I don't think Carson Beck's gotten nearly enough plaudits for how he's emerged. I thought, man, that game against Auburn, which I had a really difficult time unseeing, how Auburn, a really bad Auburn team by Hugh Freeze standards in his first year, they could have won that game. And if Brock Bowers had not been playing, they would have won that game. Well, now they get Bowers back. He's not 100%, but they got him back. And these other receivers are now really healthy and serviceable. So right now, Georgia and Michigan are the 2 teams that, I really do see as being solid, and being there, that we can pretty much count on that. But everybody else is up in the air. I mean, we could take any one of 7 or 8 teams and say who's going to be 3-4, and that's where, to me, if you're looking for a team that's going to get into that 4th spot, provided, let's say for argument's sake, Florida State does win out. Okay, if Florida State does win out, and Michigan does win out, and Georgia does win out, then who are we going to see in that 4th spot? I got a hard time not accepting, even if Oregon beats Washington and the Pac-12 champion has a loss. I have a real hard time of thinking a Pac-12 champion in that league this year wouldn't get its one-loss champion in. I think they would get in over, say, Alabama, who has 1 loss, but a loss against Texas at home. And that's suggesting to you that Texas is going to lose, which I believe they will. I think Texas is going to lose, whether it's at Iowa State or in the Big 12 title game. I think that I know they're chomping at the bit to get Oklahoma State in a rematch. I know they love that, but I just think that Texas is vulnerable. But I mean, you saw that second half against TCU. Mm-hmm. I mean, and Brooks is now a little banged up, and now there's some talk about. I mean, I'm hearing. I don't know. I've not talked to Archie or Coop, but I'm hearing word that Arch might be considering a potential is out there. There have been published reports that he might transfer. There's a lot for Sark to handle right now, both on the field and off. They're certainly going to need a healthy Brooks because he's a difference maker. I mean, he is an absolute difference maker to that offense. So I question whether Texas can stay at 1 loss. But to me, if you were weighing either Oregon or Washington with 1 loss, against Texas or Alabama with one loss, I would take the Pac-12 champion.
Yeah,
I would.
And Brooks is out. He's got the torn ACL, so he is out.
He's done.
Yeah, he's done.
So without Brooks, where do you go? I mean, as a playmaker, I know they've got a stable, and I know that I called one of their games. I saw when they were able to run the ball and when they weren't. And it's good that Ewers is back, and certainly they've got Xavier Worthy's a great receiver. He's one of probably the top 5 receivers in the country. But I think Texas is vulnerable here, and I think that the Big 12, when measured against the Pac-12, is also vulnerable in the committee's eyes when you're trying to get down to 14. Listen, it would all be so much more fun and enjoyable if we had 12 right now. It's just a damn shame we couldn't have done it this year. Mm-hmm. But I do think that next year people are going to see how awesome it's going to be. And then when the television committee gets together, and they already are talking about it, they're going to go to 16, fellas, in 26. When they have the new television deal, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be 16 teams. Those top 4 teams will not get a bye. They'll get an additional home game, which ought to make their fans happy.
Tim, we appreciate you as always. I know to give one more final note, it's been quiet. At least it appears it's been quiet with Michigan this week because of what was like the last 2 or 3 weeks. Right. And they went out and they punched Penn State, close game, but they were the better team. Your thoughts about what is the end game here?
Isn't there a chance that they could get that judge to grant a stay and Harbaugh could be on the sideline Saturday? Is that? Yeah. I think that's still the potential is there.
Yeah, Friday's the hearing. So
sounds like the potential is there for that, and this thing is only going to get, I think, more sordid and more nasty between the two. You guys heard what I had to say about it last week. I don't want to beat a dead horse on it. Because I still think a lot of Tony Petitti. I do. I think he's the right commissioner. I do think he got coerced a little bit here in a way that I did not like, but at the same time understand to a point. Does Michigan deserve to be punished? Yeah. But to the extent to which they have been here, I mean, you're going to have your head coach now. If he does serve this time, to go along with the time at the beginning of the year between the NCAA and the Big Ten, Jim Harbaugh will have missed over 40% of the season in terms of game coaching. Okay, which tells me something about the resolve of his football team.
Yep.
McCarthy is probably out of the Heisman race simply because of the stat no passes thrown in the second half of the Penn State game. So he's probably out of that mix, but I think that's not of concern to him. He's just a leader. He's like a Max Duggan. The kid's a winner, and he's a leader. And that's the thing about the Michigan offense that impresses me, how they just roll past people. You know what's coming. You can't stop it, whether it's Edwards or it's Corum that's running the football. They're going to eventually, nail you. They're going to beat you. They're going to beat you the Michigan way, which is what Jim Harbaugh's infrastructure is all about. So whether Jim is there or he's not, they're still winning the Harbaugh way. It does kind of take me back to the Bo Schembechler way, the team. And that's why I think Michigan, for me anyway, has a lot of credibility moving forward. Ohio State still hasn't shown me, that other than Marvin Harrison, anybody can make plays. And McCord is still getting by in large measure because Jim Knowles' defense has evolved and is now playing the kind of defense we all thought they would have been playing this time last year and never did because they didn't have the right linebackers to play the defense that he wanted and designed that would work so well for him at Oklahoma State. What will be the end game here is I think Michigan, just like Auburn when the Cam scam thing hit in 2010, I think a few weeks from now we'll be going, everyone was gnashing their teeth and going berserk, but in the end, the Wolverines just were the best team. They may not have been the prettiest team, aesthetically fun to watch as so many of the others, but they had the resolve. So I picked Michigan at the beginning of the year. I'm going to stay with them. And it doesn't matter to me whether he's on the sideline or not. Even for the Ohio State game, I still manage to believe that they will get the job done. And when he returns, oh my God, imagine the buzz, for the college football postseason. So the other team that I really love, if not Michigan, would be the team that I had number 3 to start the year, and that was Oregon. That was a team I believed in then, and I believe Bo Nix is the best player in college football. The kid is just playing at a very, very high level. So I know a lot of Georgia fans are like, Brando, you ignorant slut, and that's okay. I can deal with that. Get in line with Bammer fan, okay?
Yeah.
Brando is an ignorant slut. I'm okay with that. But those are the 2 teams I really like right now. Michigan, regardless of the circumstances, I think it's just a rallying point for them with Jim, and Oregon, because Lanning and that staff and Bo Nix Bo Nix is just playing at a level beyond anybody's thoughts. He's like a pro playing the quarterback position in college.
Tim, as always, greatness. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Fox Sports, Tim Brando.
Happy to be